In the small Indiana town of French Lick, where the hills rolled gently and the nights were quiet enough to hear the wind move through the trees, a boy named Larry Joe Bird grew up surrounded by the hum of ordinary life. His childhood was marked by struggle and simplicity, the kind that shapes resolve long before a person knows what destiny awaits them. French Lick wasn't a place of privilege or promise. It was working-class America in its purest form. Neighbors helping one another, people living paycheck to paycheck, and young kids finding escape wherever they could. For Larry, that escape was a worn basketball hoop nailed to a wooden backboard behind his house. His father, Joe Bird, worked hard but fought his own battles, with money, with purpose, with life itself. His mother, Georgia, kept the family steady through sheer will, raising 6 children and holding them together when times were hardest. Larry absorbed those lessons in silence. He was a boy who spoke little, observed much, and understood early that survival required both endurance and pride. His father's death, a quiet tragedy that haunted him for years, left an indelible mark. It was a kind of loss that didn't just hurt, it hardened. From that moment, Bird's sense of purpose sharpened. Basketball was no longer just something to do. It was something to be. At Springs Valley High School, Larry's talent was impossible to hide. His hands, big and steady, could guide a basketball as if he were molding clay. He wasn't flashy, not the kind of player who drew gasps with acrobatics. But there was a beauty in his precision. He scored, he passed, he rebounded, he defended. Whatever the game needed, he provided. He learned to see the floor in ways others couldn't, understanding that the game was as much mental geometry as physical motion. When he played, it seemed as though time slowed down. The crowd saw a kid from French Lick. Larry saw angles, timing, inevitability. After high school, he accepted a scholarship to play for the legendary Indiana Hoosiers under Coach Bob Knight. But Bloomington, with its sprawling campus and high expectations, overwhelmed him. Larry wasn't ready for the spotlight or the pace. Within weeks, he packed up his things and went home. To many, it looked like a failure, a dream abandoned before it began. To Larry, it was something different, a return to the familiar, to recalibration. He worked odd jobs, including driving a garbage truck, earning a modest wage while quietly deciding what to do next. That year, he learned as much about himself as any coach could have taught him. Eventually, he found his way back to college basketball, enrolling at Indiana State University in Terre Haute. It wasn't a powerhouse program, but Bird didn't care. He wasn't chasing fame. He wanted to play, to compete, to build something from the ground up. What followed was one of the most remarkable transformations in college basketball history. In 3 short years, Bird elevated Indiana State from anonymity to national prominence. Every night, he played with a mixture of calm confidence and ruthless precision, pulling the team and the town into belief. People came from miles away to see him. He became a folk hero, the country kid with the soft hands and sharper instincts, the small-town player doing big city things. The 1979 NCAA championship game was a defining moment not just for Bird, but for basketball itself. Across the court stood Magic Johnson, a smiling, charismatic force of nature leading Michigan State. The contrast between the two was poetic. Magic with his flash and energy, Bird with his silence and calculation. The world tuned in. The game itself was a collision of styles and futures, a foreshadowing of what the NBA would become. Michigan State won that night, and Bird's Sycamores fell short. But the duel ignited something larger than the score. It was the birth of a rivalry that would shape the next decade of professional basketball. When Larry Bird joined the Boston Celtics later that year as the 6th overall pick, the franchise was adrift. The glory years of Bill Russell and John Havlicek had faded, and the Boston Garden, once a cathedral of basketball, had grown quiet. Bird's arrival changed everything. He didn't do it with speeches or swagger, but with an unrelenting standard of excellence. From his first game, the team's identity shifted. Boston started winning again, 61 games in his rookie year, and Bird's influence spread like fire through dry grass. He didn't simply score points. He elevated everyone around him. His passing was unselfish and exact, his defense sharp, his leadership subtle but absolute. That year, he was named Rookie of the Year, and Boston rediscovered its pride. It wasn't long before reinforcements arrived. Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale, Dennis Johnson, and the Celtics were reborn as a dynasty in waiting. What followed was one of the most storied eras in NBA history. At the center of it all was Bird, stoic, cerebral, unrelenting. He approached every game as if it were a test of intellect as much as endurance. His mind was always 2 steps ahead, dissecting defenses, anticipating reactions, exploiting weaknesses. Teammates spoke of his quiet dominance, his almost psychic understanding of movement and rhythm. Opponents spoke of his cruelty, not in words, but in execution. Bird would tell defenders exactly where he planned to score from, then do it every time. His confidence wasn't bravado, it was certainty. As Bird's legend grew, so did his rivalry with Magic Johnson. The two men, so different in background and temperament, became bound by destiny. Magic represented Showtime, the glitz of Los Angeles, fast breaks and flair. Bird represented substance, Boston grit, precision, the power of fundamentals. When their teams met in the NBA Finals, the nation paused. It was more than basketball. It was cultural theater. East versus West, work ethic versus style, restraint versus charisma. In 1984, Bird's Celtics triumphed, earning him the Finals MVP and personal vindication. But the rivalry didn't end there. Magic struck back in 1985 and 1987. And together they carried the NBA into a golden age. Behind the scenes, their competitive fire turned into mutual respect. Bird admired Magic's joy and grace. Magic admired Bird's relentless focus. They understood something few others could, that their greatness was forged in each other's reflection. Their duels weren't just games. They were performances that elevated an entire sport, restoring the NBA's reputation and captivating the world. Through the mid-1980s, Bird reigned as the league's most complete player. He won 3 consecutive MVP awards, a feat few have matched, and led the Celtics to 3 championships. The 1986 team, in particular, is still remembered as one of the finest in basketball history. Bird's numbers were remarkable, but the beauty of his game wasn't in the statistics. It was in the feel. The no-look passes threaded through traffic, the perfectly timed rebounds, the quick flick of his wrist that sent the ball arcing through the air like a promise fulfilled. Every shot seemed designed, every decision premeditated. He was an artist in motion, painting with precision rather than flash. But time and the toll of relentless effort began to wear on him. Years of diving for loose balls and absorbing hits took their toll on his back. By the late 1980s, pain had become his constant companion. There were nights when he could barely stand upright, when he'd lie flat on the locker room floor between quarters just to keep his spine from locking. Yet he kept playing. The idea of quitting, of letting injury dictate the terms, was unthinkable. He played through agony because he believed that was what it meant to honor the game. His body faltered, but his mind remained razor sharp. Even diminished, he found ways to contribute, to lead by intelligence and instinct when physicality failed him. When the 1992 Olympics came around, Bird joined the Dream Team, a collection of the greatest players ever assembled. Though his back was failing, his presence carried symbolic weight. standing beside Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, and other titans. Bird represented continuity, the bridge between eras, the man who had helped make this moment possible. The Dream Team dominated, dazzling the world and solidifying basketball as a global phenomenon. For Bird, it was a fitting final act, not as the star of the show, but as its foundation. Later that year, Larry Bird announced his retirement. After 13 seasons everyone spent in Boston, the Hick from French Lick walked away from the court. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt. There were no tears from Bird, only quiet gratitude. He had given the game everything he had, his mind, his body, his will, and in return the game had given him immortality. Retirement didn't end his relationship with basketball. It simply changed its form. Bird returned to Indiana, the state that had made him, and took on new challenges. As head coach of the Indiana Pacers, he brought his signature discipline and intelligence to a new generation of players. Under his guidance, the Pacers reached the NBA Finals and came within moments of a championship. Later, as an executive, Bird built teams with the same principles he lived by: toughness, intelligence, and unselfish play. In time, he became the only person in NBA history to win MVP, Coach of the Year, and Executive of the Year. A trifecta that underscored not just his skill, but his understanding of the game's every layer. Yet numbers and awards tell only part of his story. Larry Bird's legacy endures because of what he represented: the idea that greatness doesn't need glamour. He was never the most athletic, never the fastest, but he outthought, outworked, and outlasted nearly everyone he faced. He showed that basketball could be a craft as much as a spectacle, that intelligence and effort could triumph over flash and fame. In a sport that often celebrates noise, Bird's quiet confidence stood as its own form of poetry. Today, his name still echoes through arenas and conversations, carried by those who saw him play and those who learned from his legend. He remains a symbol of authenticity, the small-town kid who became a giant, the craftsman who built his empire one precise pass and perfect shot at a time. From French Lick to Boston, from the hum of the heartland to the roar of the Garden, Larry Bird's story endures as one of the most human in sports history. A life defined not by the applause it earned, but by the integrity with which it was lived.